Due process of law. Section 1, Article 3. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Definition of the due process of law. A law which hears before it condemns, which proceeds upon inquiry, and renders judgment only after trial. From the case of Dartmouth College versus Woodward. Responsiveness to the supremacy of reason, obedience to the dictates of justice. From the case of Ermita Malate Hotel versus City of Manila. Due process of law is the embodiment of the sporting idea of fair play. From the case of from Frankfurter, Mr. Justice Holmes, and the Supreme Court, who are protected under the due process of law. Universal in application to all persons without regard to any difference in race, color, or nationality. Artificial persons are covered by the protection, but only insofar as their property is concerned. The guarantee extends to aliens and includes the means of livelihood from the case of Villegas versus Huichong. Meaning of life, liberty, and property. Life includes the right of an individual to his body in its completeness, free from dismemberment, and extends to the use of God-given faculties which make life enjoyable. Liberty includes the right to exist and the right to be free from arbitrary personal restraint or servitude. It also includes the right of the citizen to be free of the use of his faculties in all lawful ways. From the case of Ruby versus Provincial Board of Mindoro. Property is anything that can come under the right of ownership and be the subject of contract. It represents more than the things a person owns. It includes the right to secure, use, and dispose of them. Public office is not public property, but one unlawfully ousted from it may institute an action to recover the same, following or flowing from the de jure officer's right to office. From the case of Nunez versus Aviria. Indeed, the court, while public office is not property to which one may acquire a vested right, it is nevertheless a protected property. One's employment, profession, or trade, or calling is a property right, and the wrongful interference therein is an actionable wrong. Thus, an order of suspension without opportunity for hearing violates property rights. But its proper regulation has been upheld as a legitimate subject of the police power of the state, particularly when its conduct affects either the execution of legitimate governmental functions, the preservation of the state, and the public health and welfare and public morals. From the case of GMM Promotion and Management versus Court of Appeals. A mining license that contravenes a mandatory provision of law under which it is granted is void. Being a mere privilege, a license does not vest absolute rights in the holder. Thus, without offending the due process and the non-impairment clause of the Constitution, it can be invoked by the state in the public interest. From the case of Republic versus Rosemore Mining. Mere privileges, such as license to operate a cockpit, are not property rights and are revocable at will. The license to carry firearm is neither a property nor a property right, neither does it create a vested right. A permit to carry a firearm outside one's residence may be revoked at any time. Even if it were a property right, it cannot be considered as absolute, as to be placed beyond the reach of police power. From the case of Chavez versus Romulo. The mandatory suspension of office or from office of a public official pending criminal prosecution for violation of RA 3019 cannot amount to deprivation of property without due process of law. From the case of Libanon versus Sindigan Bayan. Aspects of due process. There are two aspects of due process, substantive and procedural due process. Substantive due process serves as restriction on the government's law and rule-making powers. The requisites of substantive due process are 1. The interest of the public in general, as distinguished from those of a particular class, requires the intervention of the state. 2. The means employed are reasonably necessary for the accomplishment of the purpose, and not unduly oppressive on individuals. In Wong Sing versus City of Manila, an ordinance requiring all laundry establishments to issue the receipts in English and Spanish was held valid. In Yu Ing Kong versus Trinidad, the court declared as unconstitutional a law prohibiting traders from keeping their books of accounts in a language other than English, Spanish, or any local dialect. In JSIS versus Montes Claros, the Supreme Court declared as invalid Section 18 of PD 1146, which provides that the surviving spouse has no right to survivorship pension if the surviving spouse contracted marriage with the petitioner within 3 years before the petitioner qualified for the pension benefit. In a pension plan, where employee participation is mandatory, employees have vested rights in the pension. Thus, where the employee retires and meets eligible requirements, he acquires vested right to the benefits protected by the Due Process Clause. Section 18 of PD 1146 is seriously oppressive in outrightly denying the claim of a dependent spouse for survivor's pension benefits if the dependent spouse contracted marriage within the 3-year prohibited period. Procedural due process. This serves as restriction on actions of judicial and quasi-judicial agencies of the government. It includes 1. Impartial court or tribunal clothed with judicial power to hear and determine the matter before it. 2. Jurisdiction must be lawfully acquired over the person of the defendant and over the property which is the subject matter of the proceeding. 3. The defendant must be given an opportunity to be heard. 4. Judgment must be rendered upon lawful hearing. 'Is that all?